Good day. I would like to talk with you today about a subject which is almost entirely avoided in our public life and certainly in private life. It is death. Nobody knows what happens after death. Many people, of course, say they know what they do, but it's all just a series of guesses. If you are religious, you believe in some sort of a supreme being, fair enough. That's your choice. But you do not know for certain. The only thing you do know is that we are all going to die, one way or another, one time or another, and for whatever reason. But, and here I'm afraid that you are going to be a little bit surprised by what I tell you. If you go into a hospital for a scheduled operation, or indeed for an emergency operation, you are looked upon, you are considered, you are filed, the decisions are filed as to how you look and how you react and how you reply. And these decisions are all collated and put together in a document which should be called the death certificate, the true death certificate. If you know anything about health and the heart at all, you may well have heard about the term DNACPR, which means, or it is short for, do not attempt cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The equipment used for this process is called a defibrillator. It is a machine designed a long time ago, but perfected so it can be used by almost anybody. It consists of an electrical generator, and the user of that equipment, the defibrillator, positions the paddles either side of your chest and delivers a very, very sophisticated electrical pulse straight into your heart. And if your heart has been fibrillating or palpating and isn't doing any job because it's bouncing about all the time, suddenly that electric shock will remind the heart muscles of what they've got to do. And bingo, you're back alive again. But don't get me wrong, that true death certificate is filled out if you are infirm, if you are old, if you are frail, if you have mental problems, if you are considered less than worthy of life, that equipment will not be switched on for you. If you had an operation, and that is the worst time of all, the dangerous time is after you've had the operation and you've been through it, and you survive, suddenly that heart attack catches you. And if those medical professionals who have sat around a table or a desk or a canteen chair table or whatever, and had a look at the comments and had a look at your medical file, and they decide, no, he or she, the statistics are against you and you will not make it, and therefore they make their decision that you definitely will not make it, and therefore they put on a DNR, do not resuscitate notice, and that notice has the firmness of law behind it. A nurse, a sister, a doctor who performs that heart sort of machine to bring your heart back to life if he performs it without studying that file, and if he performs the heart attack resuscitation without authorization, he will be disciplined because he is going against the law. Now, I mean, personally speaking, I know quite a bit about this death certificate because it was signed over my wife's body before she had the operation. My wife was frail. She had a mental illness. She couldn't speak properly, but she was my wife of 53 years, of 3 adult kids, of a time of joy, of love, of sadness, and of a time together of quiet happiness. But my wife fell from her bedside, fractured a hip, and I accompanied her as she travelled towards the emergency rooms at the University Hospital of North Durham. And I stood beside my wife as we waited for the various examinations to take place. And my wife was taken away and she was x-rayed. And the opinion of the ambulance men and woman was that she'd fractured her hip, and it was found out to be true. And I was spoken to by a young female doctor, and I was told there are risks because your wife is frail and your wife may not withstand the pressures and problems of the anaesthetic. Not the operation, that's fairly straightforward. But any anaesthetic-led operation has risks. And this was discussed with me and my wife. And the alternative, which was to spend more than a couple of weeks while the fracture healed itself, was not an enhancing suggestion. So we went for the operation. And as I say, that young female doctor told me straight, there are risks, but it's a risk worth taking. My wife was wheeled away up to the wards, and I went home. And I was later called by a person who went by the medical title of orthopedic registrar, which in actual fact means that he's a young bloke under training to be a surgeon. And this pillock, and I use the term pillock advisedly because I do not want to swear, this pillock went into a 2.5, 3-minute monologue about how some people, when they were resuscitated, did not have a great quality of life after the operation. And some of those people didn't last very long. And I was left slightly puzzled because there was nothing informative that I didn't already know. But that phone call ended, and the next day, somewhere around about midday, my beloved wife went into the operation, and she came out of that operation, which was successful. And she recovered consciousness, had a cup of tea, nodded her thanks to the nurse because, as I said, she couldn't speak, and rested again. But a short time later, she had a heart attack. And because of the existence of that death certificate, my wife was left to die, unaided by electric shock, unaided by drugs, unaided by special treatment, she was left to die. I was phoned up later that evening and I was told, your wife is dead. She had a heart attack, and that was it. Nothing more substantial. No words of comfort, nothing. I was heartbroken. I was grief-stricken to the point of almost not being able to breathe and move. But over the days and weeks, I concentrated on completing all of the tasks which must be done to end a life, a digital life, an existence for my wife. And I slowly but slowly came together and I started to live again. But the coroner, because my wife died suddenly, it is an automatic system whereby the coroner asks for the evidence from the hospital and there makes a decision as to how the patient died. And I was advised by the coroner's office that the coroner would be looking at my wife's case and did I wish to attend. And I said, yeah, of course, because this was my wife. And so I made that small journey from Durham to Crook. And there I found something, well, to me, rather strange. I was almost the only person in a long time who actually came to the inquest, because nobody was bothered to ask why. But I was. And they were unready for people like me, for a person like me. And because I was beginning to be worried, and because I had seen, I'm going to get things right. Actually, I was concerned that maybe my wife and I, we hadn't been treated correctly. I asked for an adjournment, and this really, really kind man, the assistant coroner, senior coroner for Durham, agreed to give me that adjournment. When the hospital records were emailed to the coroner's office arranged for a set of records, those records to be emailed to me. And it was then I found that my wife had been sentenced to death long before she came anywhere near that bloody operating theatre table. The documentation for the hospital stated clearly and unambiguously that the husband, me, the husband, had agreed to the surgery, which was quite correct. But I had also agreed to the provision and signing of a DNR document which would rest upon my wife's bedside file. And because that DNACPR do not attempt coronary pulmonary resuscitation, because that document was signed, nobody touched my wife. And suddenly that grief broke all over me, all over again. And I determined to do something about it. So as we all have access to much of this world's knowledge and data and statistics, I went about my job of trying to get a little bit of justice for my wife Jacqueline and myself. And I compiled my data and had a good look at a lot of documents on the websites of that hospital. And I made a formal complaint, which you have to do correctly because otherwise it's just wiped away. And I made that complaint, and I received a reply accepting the complaint, and a second letter expanding upon the areas where they thought that complaint could be looked at. And because it was all taking a long time, in late March of this year, I received a final reply stating that, in among all the statements of condolence and we're deeply sorry and all that other bullshit, they had agreed, then offered to host a YouTube video on their website at the University of North Durham Hospital stating my patient's story. And they would also put up their reply to that video, which is fair enough. I mean, I was really happy to accept that offer. But time went by. I made that video, which is available on my own channel. I made that video, and time went on, and excuses were made, and legal terminology has to be given, and all the concentrated bullshit of an administration which doesn't really want to know. Until I think it was last Wednesday, I was called up by the senior, or the manager rather, of the patient's experience team, and told bluntly that they couldn't upload onto the website my video. And that was it. And that was the time when I started compiling the various bits of my evidence and complaining to the Parliamentary Ombudsman, which is the place that you go to if you have a really serious complaint against the NHS or a hospital or a government department. I will not go away. I will pursue this, and I will take these bastards out and shovel them into the cleaners, because this was my wife and my life, and I will do my best to make them remember, to never forget that they treated an elderly woman badly, and they treated an elderly man even worse, because they wouldn't even say honestly that they were sorry, but they couldn't do much about it. I thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again.